I think number one would be to stay abreast of the latest information, teaching practices, and technologies, because the better you are knowledgeable about those things, the better you can share that with your students.
Thank you both so much, Melissa and Lee, for being on this podcast today. I'm really excited to talk to you both, not only about the APH products, the TVI Symposium, but also about you guys and what brought you into the field and all of your passions and your expertise. Before we actually get into all of that, I would love for each of you to share a little bit about yourself. Melissa, would you like to start?
Sure. So I am Melissa, and I started off as a general education teacher. And my husband and I were blessed with 2 kids. And when our second one was born, we noticed something just off with her eyes, which led to a pediatric ophthalmologist and, down the whole diagnosis of albinism. And at the same time, our son, who was not at the appointment, was suggested to bring him down as well. So we, again, as a general education elementary teacher, had no experience with anyone in particular as blind or low vision. And now I had a 3-month-old who was diagnosed with albinism and a 2.5-year-old who was more than likely also diagnosed. So that was kind of the start of my personal journey into this field. And since then, when she was younger, she had OT, PT, and all of that. And we did not have any support for vision or anything in early intervention. So that also kind of led me down to a path of supporting families in early intervention of parents or grandparents, family members who are raising children who are blind or low vision. So I did go back and get my TVI, which I said I would probably not go back to college, and I did. And so again, that led me down the path of working with families, and I absolutely love that in the early intervention space, which led me to my professor, who stated she had a job, and it was with APH Connect Center. And so from there, I have been in this role of supporting families through APH's Connect Center for Families. So there you go.
Wow, that's a lot. I'm going to stay here for just a second. It's really interesting when we talk to other people in the field, how they got into the field. I got into the field, I was 19, right? This is my first career. It's not usual that people come in as their first career, but for you have got to be so impactful in your job because you can truly empathize with the parents. Has that been something that you found that really helped you when you're connecting with the parents through the Connect Center?
Absolutely. And the same with early intervention. Again, a lot of the families, when I was going into their home, they knew no one who was blind or low vision, and now they have their child with a diagnosis, and they never met a parent of a child, raising a child. So it really was a lot of that connection right from the get-go. While all of my parents may have had different diagnoses with their children, there was still that commonality of we were figuring it out together. And the same thing very much with a lot of the families from the Connect Center, because we offer a lot of webinars, a lot of blogs, and I come from a standpoint kind of that, what would I have wanted in that stage, or what do I want? My kids are 11 and 14, so they have not left the house. And I feel like once you're a parent, you're always a parent. So even when they're much older, what are some of the things that we may encounter or I need to support in a different manner? So absolutely, I stand from a place of what do I want other families to know, or what do I want to still learn, which I think does help that personal perspective when connecting with families.
I can totally see that. I'm going to point to 2 things, and one of them we'll circle back around to. You went back to college when you had 2 kids who had been diagnosed with visual impairments. I could barely hold my job that I had been doing for a decade when I had 2 kids. So, and it's not like so you went back to college to be like a CEO and make millions of dollars. You went back to college to make the same amount of money that you've been making before. So kudos to you, and thank you for being in the field for that. That had to have been so hard.
It was a balancing act. we had a lot of study time, and that's your time to read and that's my time to work. And a lot of help from my husband. Absolutely. I'm like, I need a chunk of time to get these assignments done. Yeah.
For now, I'd love to pass the mic over to Lee. Lee, would you like to share a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. I have been with APH for almost right at 3 years, and I am the chief strategist for accessible technology and community outreach. And I work on a newer program for APH called APH Huntington, which refers to Huntington, West Virginia, which is a rural town, right, kind of where Kentucky, West Virginia, and Ohio meet. Our population is just under 50,000. And so what we're looking to do here in this area is learn to serve our rural communities. So APH can take some of those learnings and extrapolate those to other rural areas across the country. And so in a rural area, what you find is many people, especially kids, think or find that they're the only person in their school district who is blind or visually impaired. They don't know anyone who has a visual impairment. And many times learning orientation and mobility is much more difficult because there are no city streets. Many people live on rural country roads, and maybe getting to your first job or to town is like 5 miles down the road. And there's just internet connectivity issues for folks about getting access to the internet. And so there's a lot of different challenges here that may not exist in larger cities. And so we're looking to learn how to better serve this community and others like it for APH.
That's really exciting. I live in Texas, as you guys might know, and during my first year as a contract teacher, I would go out to really small towns, and we did experience all of those things.
Right.
Where I had gone from, being in Austin where I could take the student off campus walking somewhere. I was literally pulling off a highway to go to this campus, to a high school campus, and I'd be like, oh, legally I'm not I can't put you in my car. There's no school bus system that runs out here because it's the only school in the county. And okay, how are we going to do this? And it is really interesting to try to figure out the pieces of their puzzle because they really rely on other people a lot more. I have some other students out in very rural areas right now, and we're still trying to figure it out. So I'm glad APH is taking this on, and I look forward to your findings. Thank you for doing the work for me, because it's
really for West Virginia and a rural community, it affects senior citizens as well, because many of them either no longer drive or can't get to a store. So if you don't have that, you don't have connectivity, or maybe you do not even have an opportunity to learn basic computer skills as a person with vision loss, that compounds your opportunity to use something like Instacart to have your groceries delivered to you. So there's a lot of rural challenges in a rural community.
Yeah, but America is made up of a bunch of rural communities.
That's exactly right.
So
right.
I think that what you guys are doing is on the right path, and APH is always so innovative, which is why we love APH. And taking this as a case study and really learning in a heart-centered approach is going to be really transformative for our field in general. So thank you for doing all of that work.
Well, great. Glad to be doing it.
You had mentioned, can you explain your job again, the chief technology?
It's the senior strategist for accessible technology and community outreach. I started my career about 18 years ago with the American Foundation for Blind. That was my first job in the field, and started under a grant which really looked to improve the readability of small visual displays. So back in the day, probably you don't remember, and maybe Melissa doesn't remember either, but cell phones were all flip phones or candy bar style phones and had little small 2-inch or 3-inch displays, and that's all there really was. There were no color, it was just black and white. They were difficult to read. And so there was a grant that the American Foundation for the Blind received to improve the readability of those displays. That was before iPhones or any tablets or anything like that. And so started with that, and then began evaluating low vision technology for their technology magazine, Access World, which is a great resource about different types of access and mainstream technologies. And after writing for those and evaluating for a few years, became the editor-in-chief of the publication for about 10 years before moving over to APH.
That's really exciting. So for those of you guys listening, we're all on video right now, and I'm just going to have to say thank you to Lee for thinking that Melissa and I we don't have memories of these cell phones. Yes. We owned these cell phones. We remember landlines and cassette tapes.
Yep.
But I
Very
appreciate
good.
you.
Very good.
Like, oh, do I look that young? I'm okay with this.
You had talked a little bit about how Melissa came to the field, and I came to the field sort of, unintentionally, quite honestly. I had been teaching, I had low vision, I have Stargardt, and that's a juvenile form of macular degeneration, and really got my first pair of glasses probably in the 3rd grade, and they didn't really help. And actually looking through them made it worse. And so I would like lose them, quote, lose them all the time and not use them. And really didn't wear anything through all of my schooling, any type of glasses, and didn't really get a diagnosis until I was about 15 or 16 years old, because it is so rare. I was told that many ophthalmologists and optometrists see 1 or 2 cases in their entire career. And so I had to not only, leave the area where I was living, Charleston, West Virginia, and go to a eye research center in Morgantown, West Virginia, to even really get that true diagnosis. So it was a long time to even receive that. And once I received it, didn't even know what it meant. And went a long time trying to figure it out. And so I was teaching actually in an associate degree school, lost my job at one point and didn't know what to do. And so I came into contact with a counselor at West Virginia Rehabilitation, and she said, well, you might want to go and learn about this thing that American Foundation for the Blind is doing in Huntington called Career Connect. And so I thought, okay. And so I went and I met the lady who ran the program at the time, Dr. Karen Wolf, and remembered her, tried to apply to AFB and some other local nonprofits in our area that dealt with vision loss. Nobody was hiring. And about 6 or 8 months later, I received an email about a job opening at AFB in Huntington. And the requirements were an engineering degree. I thought, I don't have an engineering degree. And my counselor said, you're going to apply for this anyway. And so I did, and it all worked out, and I started reviewing products. And that's why I came into the field, was actually the program that actually is now run by APH, the Connect Center, started out at AFB. And so really the Connect Center and all of those offerings really worked for me. And that brought me into the field. That's how it started. When they were trying to expand the Connect Center or the Career Connect at AFB, they were having some local people who were employed or had jobs to train them to be mentors for other kids who were in the area that had blindness or low vision in their life to deal with. And I went for that and tried to, meet and talk with all the different professionals that were there to just get them to know my name. That worked. And 6, 8 months later, I got an email about a job opening. So that's how it happened.
Do you think, and you can be completely honest with me, nobody else is listening, it's just you
Of course,
that your struggles growing up, we all have struggles growing up, I'm not saying, but that learning about the technology that exists, do you think that you have more of affinity for it because it's what you could have used as a kid, or like, oh, I wish I would have had that, or like, oh, this is really exciting, it opens up a world, because it's not like so it was just handed to you from the get-go and you didn't have to struggle for it? Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and that's exactly true. When I first went, the very first day, it takes everything you have to really reach out as a person with a visual impairment. For me, it did, even as a younger adult, to reach out and make that first call asking for help, because you have no idea what's on the other side of that call. And the counselor that I went to see had low vision herself. She was employed at West Virginia Rehabilitation. Her name was Sherry Cook. And on her desk, she had a large monitor and she had Zoom text. And she had what they called back then a CCTV, which was a large monitor and an XY table. And I said, what is that? What are you using? And she goes, do you not know about this? And I said, no. And she said, come around here. And I thought that was Christmas. I thought, I can't believe this exists. And that's how I got started in knowing about technology. And about a month ago, someone who actually runs a nonprofit for blindness and low vision asks me, why do you like technology so much? And I couldn't believe she asked me, because she helps people every day who are blind or low vision. And I said, my entire life is built on it. If I didn't have it, I wouldn't have the job that I do. I wouldn't be able to live where I live, make the choices that I do. Because when you have employment, you have choices about where you live, what you do, what you buy, where you go on vacation, and where you send your kids to school. And if you don't, many times those choices are made for you. So technology is something you build your life on, especially if you have blindness or low vision in your life.
And we know that our people with visual impairments are 80 90% plus unemployed or underemployed.
Yes.
And the big linchpin here are those transition activities. I'm sure you guys have gone into voc rehab centers where people very high level of intellect, high level of abilities are screwing on like screw caps and stuff. And we're in someone mentioned it, the Renaissance era of our field. And I love that because I think we're starting to see that we can do better. We can make these transition activities better. And I think also, I'm going to kind of go on a little tangent here, but the American school system is broken. We know this. It was specifically built for factory workers by factory owners. No doubt about that. Those are the facts. And we're no longer putting factory work jobs on a huge pedestal. That's not necessarily our goal. So can you guys both tell me why this specific project really mattered to you? Because it sounds like you both have different backgrounds, but they really tie into what you guys are doing and what you're presenting on. Can you guys share a little bit about that?
Go for it, Lee, and then I'll follow up.
One thing I think it's really important as far as transition activities, number one, the kids that I'm seeing in our rural area, many of them don't even have the expectation for work. The parents don't have the expectation for them to work. And some of them may have to go 15 miles to find a place to go to work. And so the idea of the transition steps, I'm not sure that they're actually, quote, getting that they need to follow these and be working on them. And that's one thing that I really want to impress upon all transition age students is these are what you need to be doing to become career ready and to become independent. And if it means you've got to pick up and move away from your parents and get a small apartment somewhere at a place where you can get to work and learn those travel skills, bus skills, whatever those skills are to make you career or work ready, those are things that you need to be working on. And you don't get those in an instant. Those come over time. And that's why it's important to be developing them as you go through middle school and into high school. You can't do it your senior year and expect to get it immediately.
And I will say, I think I come from two places with that early intervention experience and trying to implement ECC skills very early on and giving parents that if you can do some of these things now, this is where it will lead. So giving those high expectations to parents when their child is very young, and they can have chores, they can put things away, they can do all those things. It just might look differently. And then from the parent perspective, myself, knowing in this space that we are raising children, they can monetize an awful lot of things that they know and a lot of things that they are passionate about. And so when talking to my 11 and 14-year-old, it's very different than me growing up. It's college, and that's where everybody wants, you to go. There's college, there's trades, there's all sorts of other options. And so I think for me personally, I stand on I need to show the buffet to my children, and let them follow their passions. And I need to be able to support that. At the same time, whatever their passion and whatever they're led to, I need to also implement some of those skills and some of the things to make them successful down the road now. And so I feel like coming from that parent perspective of providing teachers who don't have a lot of time to do a lot of this research, you don't have to do this research. You don't have to recreate the wheel. We have some things that we can offer and provide you, and you can then take it and tailor it. But there's also things that you can give parents to put on their radar that their child might not be ready for right now, but maybe in 6 months, maybe in a year, they are.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I read an article, I can't remember, it was a few years ago, that gave transition activities really young as well. I can't remember who had written it. And I loved that perspective because often we think of transition now as 14 plus and we're like, oh, that's so new age. Oh, we're getting the 14-year-olds involved. But my kids came home the other day. I have a 7 and a 9-year-old. They're 2 boys, and they're so hoity-toity sometimes. They have like this attitude. They just think that they're like the hottest stuff. And they were like, my friend's mom doesn't have any expectation of him. And I was like, whoa, that's not how things are going to go. And I was very firm in that you guys are not going to go to college not knowing how to do your laundry or budget or go grocery shopping or anything like that. Because when I went to college, a lot of my friends dropped out because they couldn't figure out how to like make food or budget their money or live on their own at all. And granted, I still had to call my mom and I still had to make phone calls home, but it was like to make these like complex meals, not to survive. And all of a sudden my kids just hopped up and they both volunteered to do more chores that day. I think it was my attitude about it. I was like, I Z-snapped at them, you guys. It was total 1990s moment. I was like, no, we are not having this. But if we can empower our students' parents to see that their children can grow up to have this level of independence. And Lee, you were talking about being in a rural community. It's so true. I have a student like that right now who a few years ago moved out to a very rural community, and he's very attached to his mom. Like, oh my God, the sweetest relationship. And I'm like, I'm so sorry I have to break up this relationship in 2 years. I'm so sorry. He has to move out. Like, I know nobody wants this, but there's no transportation in this city outside of like between 9 and noon. And it's not gonna work. And they're still very much grappling with it. And that was 2 years ago I brought this up. So yeah, I think that's both of you having such great hearts and having a personal tie into this. Leah, I can imagine when you were 16, when you were 14, if you had these activities, I can just imagine how heartfelt it is for you to be able to offer this extra step up to all of these students. And because APH is so nationally known and recognized and fantastic at what you guys do, because of the heart that each person behind the product puts into it, the product itself they're always immaculate. They really are, but it's a labor of love, and you can tell.
One of the things I've really noticed before, my career was always at a high level of work. I would go to conferences and look at the latest technology, and we would in Access World review that. And so anything that I wanted literally in the world on the low vision spectrum of products, I could pick up a phone or send an email and get a manufacturer to send me for free to check it out. Sometimes I kept it a little extra long if I liked it before I sent it back. And we wrote about these things in the publication, and you just think in your mind, it trickles down to everyone it needs to get to. And that is not true. When I started working more one-on-one and working with TVIs and students and things, I realized that even the TVIs, the teachers of the visually impaired, the rehabilitation counselors locally, didn't know about APH resources. They didn't know about the Connect Center. They didn't know about the 800 number that's the information referral that's toll free. They didn't have any idea about those things. And so even getting the people who teach in our area connected to the resources is a challenge. Many of them never get to go to a conference, for example, like an ATIA or a CSUN, or even know about the resources that you all have and offer. Like we're coming up in September. They don't even know that those exist because they just have been doing what they've been doing for a long time and just kind of keep doing those things. And it's not going to keep moving forward or keeping pace. And so the students will start slipping behind. And I'm afraid sometimes that's what happens.
Yeah. You just brought up a whole bag of worms. Would you like to go into a little bit of what APH Connect Center does and their offerings for those people who aren't coming to the TVI Symposium? I would love to know a little bit more, and I'm sure they would.
Melissa, I'll let you start.
Sounds good. So the Connect Center is really one of the pillars that APH offers on the service side. So our role is really to serve the lifespan. So starting off with the families side of things, we provide webinars, blogs, articles on anything. And I won't say everything because we can't cover everything, but as much as we can for raising a child who's blind or low vision. And that includes education, early intervention, transition ages, all sorts of things, mental health, relationships with peers, all sorts of articles and personal blogs. The next age group is kind of that careers. So preparing young adults for their first career, for college, for those types of things. They also offer webinars specific to that demographic and age group. And then the last group is vision aware. So that's really the adults who might be losing their vision at later in life. So now rediscovering, how do you make those accommodations in your home? How do you work with your employer to make your job now accessible? What other resources do you need to kind of work through? And technology is obviously through a whole lot of the offerings. We also offer, as Lee mentioned, the information and referral line, which we stand very proud on the fact that there are actually live people who answer the phone. So you don't get the automated press 1, press 5. You get 2 amazing people who are blind themselves, and they not only help kind of walk through what your needs are, but they are also a wealth of knowledge that will follow up and send an email or a phone call with all sorts of resources locally or nationally to kind of go through all of that. And then we have Lee with the APH Huntington offering in that rural community. I don't know, did I forget anything, Lee? I feel like I always
think that's it. You know, one of the things about our information referral line, it is answered live 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern time. So it's not just the working hours. So if you're a person that maybe you're the adult child of a person who's losing vision later in life, and you work 9 to 5 and you can't get home to find out anything or make phone calls until maybe 6 in the evening, that's okay. You can call our information referral line, and it's for people who are losing vision themselves. It's for professionals as well. So anybody can call that number 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern time and get answers to the questions that they need.
I like to ask our guests to provide one piece of advice to help our community take just one step forward to being a better TVI. What would you say? What would be your piece of advice?
So this comes from the early intervention space. And I had a couple colleagues who were in the classroom setting or as a TVI, and they would take on a couple kids in small caseloads in early intervention. And one thing that I kept hearing from them was, if I knew what their home life was like, or if I knew more about their family, that would have given me such an insight to being able to support this child. And as a parent, I can say at an IEP table, very much so, I will give you the open book about my child and what she does from before school and after school, because I feel like that paints a really good picture of the child. So one thing I would ask or hope is that as TVIs and as busy as we are, I completely know and I understand that, is just really taking the time to know what that child is like outside of school might give you an insight to some motivators, to some ways to reach that child within the 4 walls of school.
I think number one would be to stay abreast of the latest information, teaching practices, and technologies, because the better you are knowledgeable about those things, the better you can share that with your students.
Thank you so much to both of you for coming on this podcast, for being open to me being so different and doing things in a much different way than most people do things in our field, and for stepping into this innovative era that we are really leading the charge in. I really appreciate you, and it has been such a fantastic, fantastic call.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for all that you're doing as well.
Yeah.
My pleasure.